Welcome everybody back to our 5-day workshop. We are midweek and I am so glad for everybody who has joined us today. So today, Barb and I are going to talk about things you've got to know when coming out or later in life is divorce. Many people join my program because they're coming out later in life. And really, most of my work for a lot of my clients is giving them divorce support. So, this is a program that's been for the past 6 years that I've been running. Thank you so much for joining. If you're watching this on a replay, thank you so much for opening up this video and joining us. And so each day we will cover a different aspect of the journey. They are labeled inside YouTube, so you can find day 1, day 2 through day 5, and today is day 3. And this is really just a small part of what we teach in our coaching program. And we're going to talk about it fully on day 4, which is going to be January 11th of 2024. So please join us for our VIP session on Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Central Time. You must sign up to be able to join this session. So, as I said before, I believe in the power of the universe, and there is a reason that you are here. And that Barb and I have been in your shoes, and we both came out in 2016 and 2017, respectively, with most of the fear and trepidation that I know some of you may feel as well. But fast forward to today, we have helped thousands of women come out later in life. Barb and I started working together in 2021, and we had content creation, individual and group coaching, mutual support groups, and Facebook group. And I also have my podcast coming out and beyond. I also have another one called Queer Business Success, but that doesn't pertain to what I do here, although it is about people creating something after the beyond. Um, and these are some of the programs that I've had over the years. The one where we're under the rock was where I took a group of women hiking in Utah. And I had so much fun with that. And the girls in although this is all one retreat, I had 2 that year in Nashville. There's lots of testimonials about the work I do. You can find that on my website. And eventually we will drop that on the chat. We haven't done that yet. So this is who I am personally, and then this is who I am professionally. I really believe in serving others. I first did it for probably unhealthy reasons, but as time has gone on and I have grown and I have done a lot of work around myself and my childhood and my beliefs and my core values, it has now become a labor of love. And as I learned to love myself when I came out later in life, I learned to love other people from such a better place of just love and not expectation. So I feel like coming out was really one of those gifts for me. And this is my dear friend, Barb Rollinson, personally. And Barb, do you want to talk a little bit about your professional experiences?
Sure, sure. So I'm a graduate of the University of Toronto, and Sheridan College in Toronto. And I am also currently earning my master's degree in counseling psychology so I can better serve this community. I'm a licensed humanist officiant with the Ontario Humanist Society, and I also sit on the board of directors there. So I help people with a lot of very important life transitions from a humanist perspective.
I'm in a Zoom right now.
I formerly have worked on municipal and county organizations, mostly in tourism and events. So I'm very good at rallying people and getting them enthusiastic and excited about things. And it was during my time there that I learned how to do a lot of content, because sometimes when you work for a municipality, you're kind of chief cook and bottle washer. So I've learned how to do content strategy, writing in all kinds of voices for all kinds of platforms, graphic design, audio and video editing, and I'm a published author. So yeah, I have a very diverse background, but now very much pointed towards helping our later in life community.
Thanks, Barb. So let's talk about our homework. These were the 4 questions that you were asked. And if you're watching this on replay, I would love for you to reflect about these and perhaps journal about them. So Barb, can we turn off the video recording so we can go back to our group? So thank you very much. I really appreciate Nancy's thoughtfulness around her homework. And I would love to hear more of it. If you have written something and you want to share with the group, I really highly encourage you to put it up in the Facebook group. So I am going to take a really unusual approach to this because I am going to talk about rethinking divorce. And it's not really about the mechanics of divorcing. None of this is, because first of all, every state and country is different, and I am not a legal person and I cannot give legal advice. But I am a supportive person, and I can help us think differently about divorce. So I would love for you to put in the chat now and answer these 3 questions, and Barb's going to read them out for us. So please answer 1 or 2 of these. From your conditioned self, meaning what you were taught by family, faith, friends, community, because that's what conditions us. Television, art, plays. What were you conditioned to believe about marriage? What were you conditioned to believe about divorce? And what were you conditioned to believe about divorce and children? So I'll give you a couple seconds to write some stuff down. And then Barb, if you can let me know what everybody's saying, I'd appreciate it. I can't do that because my screen is on full to protect everybody's privacy.
Sure. Well, Nancy has gotten the ball rolling for us.
Thank you, Nancy.
And
chat. Oh, cool.
and answered their answers are that marriage is forever.
Yes.
And that divorce is a failure, and divorce hurts children. Some other responses are that you stay together no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And that it takes work to make a marriage work, and that it's worth it. It's never perfect. Divorce is bad, and divorce is devastating to children. Interesting.
Well, that is honestly pretty much what I think most of us believe as women, and how we've been conditioned to believe that. Because we may see examples of happy divorces or kids that are okay or even thrive after divorce. But a lot of times we only focus on what we've been told to believe about divorce. So I have worked in hospice for a really, really long time. And so I got to work with a lot of couples at the end of life. And it's really interesting because I think I'm going to give little percentages, and this is no scientific study, this is observational. But I would say between 10 to 15% of couples at the end of marriage, at the end of life together as a couple, long-term married couples, I would say 10 to 15% were super happy. I found that my couples that didn't have children really loved each other and were super happy. And then another 30, 40%, they had a life together, they made a life together, they were neither in love or hated each other. They had just gone along and, they had created something together. They loved what they created together. They loved their family. They often had with separate lives a lot of the times, but they had this sort of like almost like this shared common humanity of being in this family unit together or being married together. And then I had the other percentage were people that just were miserable. And it really helped me change my perspective about divorce. And one of the things is, here these people were at the end of their life. They stayed married because of all the reasons we all just talked about. And they were miserable and they had such regret. I have had, as a hospice chaplain, so many people tell me, I wish I had gotten divorced when I was really thinking about it. I don't know what my life could have been. So, as I always say, people do not regret the things they've done, they regret the things they didn't do. So, that I really do believe my 7 years in hospice working as a chaplain really was my catalyst for coming out and for getting divorced. So, now let's talk about it in heteronormative culture. So heteronormative culture says that the only way a relationship can happen is if it's two opposite genders, and not opposite, two genders between men and a woman. They say that they say many of the same things that we talked about in conditioning because heteronormative culture is part of our conditioning. But some of the other things, thinking outside the box, what does heteronormative culture say specifically to women about marriage, divorce, and kids? And I'm going to ask you to write it down, and Barb's going to let me know what you said.
So here's a good response, that it's our responsibility.
Yep, absolutely. We are, all of that is our responsibility, right? Marriage, kids.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
I'm gonna,
similarly, that it is our job to keep the
Mhm,
family together and to take care of the kids. And
mhm.
as women, we are conditioned to hold it all together and care for the family and the kids.
Right. And also, too, I want to give you a little factoid, one of my all-time favorite factoids. 80% of all marriages are all 80% of all divorces are initiated by women. And if the woman is college educated, it is 90%. That really blows people away when I give that figure.
Did
Why?
you say 90%?
Yes, the
Wow.
divorces are initiated by women.
Wow.
Why do you
Wow.
think? Why do you think? What do you think? You can say it out loud if you want, but it will say your first name when you talk. Or you can write it down.
I have another response here that I'd like to
Mhm.
read. Um, of all my siblings, except two, I have six, are in long-term marriages that they've made work for a long time, and my parents. I think my mom's example of sticking with my dad definitely affected us. She takes care of him at this point uh, and do not know. I don't want what she. Oh, sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing the entire message here. I think my mom's example of sticking with my dad definitely affected us. She takes care of him at this point, and I do not know. Don't want what she has when I'm that age.
Huh.
She's told me that she's hated him at times, and I think the sunken cost, fallacy cost,
Good
is
point.
referred to a lot in staying married at all costs. They've been married for 50 years.
Right. So I hear a couple of different things.
I'm
Whoever said
sorry for my grammar. Sorry.
It's okay. It's
I
okay.
was just
No,
typing quickly.
no
so
worries.
I would love to say that I had the very exact same example. My mom and dad were married for, I think, 57 years. They're both gone now. My ex-husband's parents were married for 40 years, but my mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law, died when she was like 59 or 60. Um, Both of them had miserable marriages, and both of them stuck it out. I used to have a lot of pride. Like when I got married, everybody was telling us we shouldn't get married. Like out of all of our friend groups, out of all of our couple groups, that couple friends that we had, like nobody would have predicted that my ex-husband and I would have the longest marriage. Um, so I really, really feel you, and I do think that both my ex-husband and I, hey Barb, can you not?
Oh, sorry.
Because I'm so sorry, honey.
I just realized that my thing was on and I'm typing. I'm so
Yeah, and I'm so sorry because it's clicking too much. And so, I really understand that example of like people being married no matter what. And I'm the youngest of five. My oldest sister has been married for 55 years, but she's one of those couples that's in the 10 to 15%. Her and her husband really, really love each other, and it is very evident to anybody who knows them. So, it's a sort of a both and proposition. And I also want to mention one more thing. We reward longevity. For marriages. Have you ever been to a wedding and they do that couples dance, and all the married couples get up to dance, and they said, if you've been married 5 years, sit down, 10 years, sit down. And then finally, when we get to 45 to 60 years, there's that couple standing and everybody gives them a big hand, and they absolutely hate each other.
I'm sorry, I have to interject as this is what I was just typing about. In
Yeah.
Canada, if you, at least, yeah, I don't know if they're still doing it, I'm sure they do, but I can remember my grandparents getting a letter from the Queen when they were
Ah,
married for 50 years. Now, how's that a reward for staying together all of those decades, right? So,
well, yeah, and that's rewarding heteronormative culture. We've told you to get married, and no, we've told you to get like the standard we've set in our culture is that you get married and you stay married a long time. And then, oh, on your 50th anniversary, even though you may be miserable, we're going to send you a congratulatory letter. Now, I don't want to be cynical here. There are couples that are really like are happy, and that letter is welcomed and rejoiced and everything like that. But a lot of couples really do struggle in their marriages, and they stay together because of some of the reasons we have been talking about. So I'm going to take a little different path. We have three stages of adulthood. We have early adulthood, we have middle adulthood, and we have late adulthood. And some people define the four stages of adulthood by breaking it up into middle and then to late middle age. And I am in the late middle age. So there's this fallacy out there. It's funny because you'll look it up, like the life stages of human beings, and it'll give all these life stages of children, and then it'll go adolescent, adult, and then that's it. And the funny thing is that we are continually growing and changing. So a lot of times they say this is like, oh my God, I want to get a divorce. Am I having a midlife crisis? And it is not. It is the time of our life to they're living where we are required, or we are programmed to examine how we've been told to live our life, and whether we want to live it a different way or not. So, and when that happens, we experience all kinds of emotions because of what? Because a lot of times we're still in our comfort zone, right? And then going back to the brain functioning, that like you're not so much cognitive dissonance, you're creating new neural pathways, you're doing something different, you're stepping out of your comfort zone into the fear zone, you're moving back, you're going forward, you're moving back, then you're learning and questioning. And there's just so much emotion that comes up when we decide to make changes in midlife. So what can prompt a midlife evaluations? as you can see, I wrote a lot of this here. And so all of these things can promote us to prompt us to write a midlife evaluation. Are we dissatisfied in our marriage? Um, Questioning our sexuality is coming up on lists now because it is not so much like, oh, this is just a random event that happened to like one person. No, more and more people are questioning their sexuality in midlife, men and women. You may like have gone to college to do something or gone to graduated high school and started a career, and all of a sudden you're like 40 and you're like, you hate your job. And so you decide to make changes around that. You may have had a loss, or all of a sudden you inherited a ton of money and you can do things you never could do before. A lot of times, like we said, you can have a health scare. And so all of this, and I love this, changes more openness in society. Any of us who are older than 40 here remember a time where being gay was taboo. And so now, as time has gone on, in this particular period of time, I'm a little worried it's going to become taboo again. But in this period of time, we do have a freedom around our sexuality. And so all these things are basically what? They're catalysts. They're catalysts for change and growth. So some of the big changes you can now choose may include all of these things. And one of them is whether you're going to decide whether to leave an unhealthy long-term relationship or marriage. And one of the things I always talk about to people is it's okay to consider divorce. I was from, as I said, a family where staying together at all cost is super was modeled for me. And so to even think about divorce was filled me with guilt, probably filled me with shame because of the failure aspect. But one of the things that I would really like to advise you, if you are considering divorce, please go and talk to a legal professional. A lot of times people have so many fears around divorce, but when you go and ask the questions, and a lot of those fears are around financial things too, especially for women. So when you are even slightly contemplating divorce, make an appointment or do some really good deep digging and find out what the laws are in your state, find out what you're entitled to, especially if you've been a stay-at-home mom, and also find somebody that you would be willing to work with, because people are always asking me legal stuff and I don't answer it. But one of the other reasons I don't answer it is because every state in the Union of the United States, and I don't know if every province different in Canada, or is it more uniform in Canada, Barb?
There may be provincial differences. It seems like Quebec and Alberta are the ones that seem to have the differences, but for the most part, it'll be the same across the board.
Yes. I also would like to say that if you're gay, and that is in, and honestly, if you live in the blue states, it is not a factor at all. Nobody cares. Um, if you've had a catalyst relationship, although I do not consider it an affair, I consider it awakening. I consider it about learning about yourself. I consider it, something that is really important on your entire life's journey. But unfortunately, the courts might consider it that. So there are still some states that have adultery laws. And the reason why I tell you this is because that should be a factor on whether you're going to, like, for example, if you haven't come out to your spouse yet, like, do you tell him this, because will it affect your divorce? And I always say, no matter what, whether there's any type of laws or not, one of my biggest regrets is that I told my husband I was gay before I got divorced. And I think it made the whole experience harder on me. but that is everybody's decision, personal decision. And so thinking through about, should I share this with my soon to be ex-spouse? Is it important? And if I don't share it with him, can I share it with anybody else? There's all kinds of questions that we need to ask ourselves. A lot of times with divorce too, people are looking like they like, okay, for those of us have been long time married people, we always ask, so why'd they get divorced? Like there has to be a reason. And the thing is that divorces happen, maybe there might be an event that happens, but a lot of times marriages have been struggling for a really, really long time. And so um, I never ask that question anymore. I'm going to tell you I was guilty of it in my straight life. But what I know is that I will never know what exists between two people. And if one of them decides to get divorced, I feel like they know the situation a heck of a lot better than I do. Barb, has your perspective on divorce changed since you've gotten divorced?
Oh gosh. I think I've also stopped asking that question.
Mm-hmm.
None my business why other people get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and something that I have observed, and I think that I understand better now that I have been through divorce, within just my sphere of friends and acquaintances, that women who go through divorce are typically not in a big rush to get married again.
No, they are not.
And men are.
Yeah.
And the men are, because they're like, I miss the caretaking, I miss all that. Where
Mhm.
women really, I think, use that time, and I'm speaking in generalizations, obviously, but use that time, that post-divorce time, for self-care.
Right. Or
And
to figure out what they want.
exactly.
Or they just don't want to be married anymore. So a little self-disclosure here. I had no desire to be ever married again. I would have been very happy to live with my wife for the rest of my life and not do a marriage. But she we're the same age. She never had the opportunity to be married before. That didn't become legal in the United States until 2015. So it was really, really, really important for her to get married. And so, because it was so important to her, I decided to do it. And it has changed things in real positive ways too, which surprised me. Um, but I know that, like, so what Barb said, I really understand the feeling about not wanting to get married again because it's hard to get, like, it's really hard to get divorced. And just frankly, I never wanted to go through that again. So I don't think I'm going to do that with my wife, but I completely understand about not wanting to get married again.
Yep, I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm there. Never again.
And also, Nancy, my sister is 72, and her husband has Alzheimer's, and they had gotten divorced. And she got divorced at like 70. And she said like she has no desire ever to get married again because she's also been married three times. And she's just like, I can't do this anymore. And I think that happens to a lot of women. If you ever notice, like when women become widows, hardly any of them get divorced, married again, but men do, but the women don't.
We have a comment here in our comment section saying, I've been married 2 times and not sure I want to get married again, but I have learned never say never. Well, isn't that the truth about
You have
pretty
got
much
that
everything
right,
in life?
commenter. I thought I was never going to get married again. So I totally agree with you. Never say never. Okay. So I want you to know that evaluation of lives and possibly considering divorce is normal. Completely and utterly normal. There is nothing wrong about considering and thinking divorce. And honestly, developmentally, as a human being, that is exactly where you should be, where you reconsider everything you've been told to be. take the pieces that you like and the pieces that are not working for you or not fulfilling for you, then you may need to change those pieces. And it may not be your marriage, it may be other things, but if reevaluating our lives between 35 and 65 is really, really normal. So that is what I want to say about divorce. It is not shameful, it is not a failure. It is really normal to consider divorce and ending a long term relationship. And I just want to also remind folks that marriage was created as a contract and it becomes a contract when we go to get divorced, right? Between two people. And I sometimes I feel like it's almost antiquated because back in the day when people got married, I mean, if a woman was a widow or didn't have a husband, it was very, 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 very difficult for her to survive. And so a lot of times marriage at some point in our culture was very favorable for women because it would be a way for them to keep them alive. But now I don't know if we're supposed to be married for our entire lives to one person. I don't know if we the question is shouldn't maybe we should be with different people through our lives because I think at different parts of our lives our needs and our values often change. So that's my take on divorce, that it's normal to think about it, and it is normal to um, actually pursue it and get divorced. It really is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about children and divorce now. And this is always the picture, right, that we have of kid, when we think about kids and divorce. And, it's this poor, sad little girl, and she's sitting in the corner and she's just heartbroken that mommy and daddy are divorced. Well, honestly, I'm going to give you, I think it's one of our people who said divorce, it destroys children. So the study that said that divorce was detrimental for children came out in the 1970s, and it was adopted, but it was put forth by a very conservative Christian a think tank where they were trying, because things were changing. If you think about history, 1970s, women were leaving the home, they weren't staying home anymore, people were starting to get divorced, and all of a sudden they were trying to figure out a way to keep people together. And so they basically did a study that said that divorce is horrible for children. And I'm going to say, by and large, I don't think that's true. Um, so some of the things that, so of course, if your children are growing up in an abusive or really chaotic home, um, that is like the number one reason to get divorced. I've talked to so many adult children of chaos, and they talk about really wanting their parents to get divorced when when they were young. Barb, have you found that as well?
Yeah, I think to a lot of kids it can be a real relief.
Mm-hmm.
And from my personal experience, one of my kids was completely fine with it and the other wasn't. Um, but for the most part, if there's tension in the home, like, kids aren't stupid. They they know what the source of tension is, and when that tension can break, then it's a weight off their shoulders. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they can breathe again, right?
I'm going to be in Barb's camp. I have 4 kids. Each one of them reacted differently to the divorce, and it's all on who they are as human beings. It really is. Um, and one of the things I've noticed as time has gone on, they have come to see the divorce as one of the best things that happened for myself and for their dad as well, because they have seen us be much more happier. And my ex-husband and I had, I would say, a very peaceful marriage for the last like 8 years of our marriage. We had just come to a détente. I think I wrote, a détente brokered by lots of couples therapy and just a wish for both of us to have peace. So we lived basically like brother and sister, and we had a really good friendship based on our love for our children. And so our home environment became much more relaxed. But it's really interesting. So my three older children, when I got divorced, were 19 plus, but I had a young one at home. He was 12. And I'm going to say that our divorce made him more resilient and adaptable than my other three children. um, he is definitely somebody that can adapt to the situation. He has had to do things that, his siblings did not have to do. Like, I'll never forget when he was 15, 16, I was living down here. He still lived in Connecticut with his dad, and he would come down to see me. And one time, his leg was broken, and he literally got off the plane with his broken leg and his crutches. He had it broken down by his ankle and his crutches, and then he he rebooked. The flight got canceled. He rebooked the flight and did something else regarding travel, like at 16, that I swear to God, none of my other children would have ever been able to do, because he was used to being really resilient. He was used to thinking outside the box, and I have found him to be so adaptable, much more adaptable to my other children. My youngest had to go through the divorce. So this is for those of you who have older children or mixed sibling ranges. Like, my youngest had to go through the divorce, like the nitty gritty of his dad and I separating, his dad and I living in different places. He had to go back and forth for several years until I moved. So he had to do all those things. And so it became him, he was the one that really had to adapt fast. And he was the one that did. My other children, so these are those of you who have older children, you know, a lot of times they were in the middle of their early 20s. They were not paying attention to what was going on with mom and dad. So even though they knew we were getting divorced, I don't think they thought about it until they were in our presence. And so a lot of times they came home and they were sort of shocked about all the changes. And so, or maybe they were doing something called compartmentalization. Maybe they were in denial. But I always felt like two of my children, especially, were way behind their little brother in what was going on about divorcing. So it really depends on your child, but a lot of kids are very resilient and adaptable with divorce.
Emery, we have two comments. Can I interject at this point?
Thank you.
Yes. So one person responds, my parents divorced when I was 5, and it was devastating to me personally because of the lack of support and the behavior of my dad, stepmom, and the church. So that's a thing to consider, is sort of the extension from family and the stigma. I think that
Yeah.
speaks a lot to stigma of divorce
Mhm.
within the communities that surround you. And then the other one is, I wonder what it does to kids when they see their parents in a loveless marriage, and what it does to show the kid about what a relationship should look like. I know it worked my view on relationships, and I could not agree more with the comment than that one. I know that my own girls, they now um, view relationships differently, and I wouldn't want either of them to stay in a marriage like what I had.
Right.
So
And
yeah, we're modeling behavior for them.
right. And I want to address the comment. I am, first of all, my heart goes out to you, because I can only imagine what a confusing and difficult and hard time that was. And later down in the list, I talk about, this is all really contingent on how the adults behave in the relationship. So if a new person comes into our parents' lives and they're shitty, that really can make divorce horrendous for the kid, especially. So, um, the intention is always to have the best experience for your child, with everything, right? But sometimes the adults don't hold up that side of the bargain. And so it's really not what the kids do, it's how the adults handle it. I'll never forget when I was getting divorced. My ex-husband had his now partner was there, and I went to pick my son up, the youngest, and they were over like it was my house, my old house, and they were at the dining room table, and her name is April. April bent down and kissed the top of my son's head, and I was sort of horrified. And I remember my ex-husband quickly looking up and glancing at me. And, I went to my support group, my later in life support group, Facebook group, and I talked about it. And a very wise person said that kids can't have too many people, adult people loving them. And luckily, April has been that type of person. She is very loving to my children. It was my insecurities that happened, that, that somehow she was going to replace me. But the wise women also said, no one's ever going to replace your mom. So good mom, bad mom, great mom, terrible mom, no one is ever going to replace your mom. And so it really taught me a lot about, opening up the circle and letting more people love my children, and or being accepting of other people loving my children. I think and the better parent-child relationship. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but my relationship oftentimes with my dad was mediated through my mom. It's meaning that like I would call my dad, I'd call my over to my parents' house. My dad would go, "Here's your mother." And I'm like, "But Dad, I want to talk to you for a while." But she was the arbitrator of that relationship. And because that was my model, I was really, and also because my ex-husband just wasn't emotionally available, I was the arbitrator of the relationship he had with our kids. And, much like this says, he was present, but he wasn't really emotionally involved unless he had to take them out somewhere or drive them somewhere or something like that. I was the one that did all that. And what ended up happening, which, first of all, we end up having a relationship with our child that is based on if the parent is healthy, you end up having a relationship with your child that is not mediated by the other parent at all. And I think that it's been actually really interesting, because in the beginning of when I got divorced, my kids were really upset with me. But as time went on, they began to see who their dad was. And and I mean, like you read my article, he's a good guy, but he's just not very present. And he has ended up being like that with the kids sometimes. So it has been really interesting to see how things have grown and changed as the divorce has been longer and longer. Barb, how about you?
Um, I think I agree with that as the kids get older, they begin to see who their parents are, because they end up getting more life experience. Maybe they start having their first romantic relationships, so they start to begin to understand the dynamics of adult relationships, and maybe not even just romantic relationships, but navigating new relationships in general with all kinds of different people. So as their perspective grows, so does their reflection on what they have come from. And I think that is actually a point where my youngest, where she started to turn the corner as she got further along in high school and developed some more maturity. And she began to see, more like what her dad is like and why I might choose to leave that relationship. And how we were just a very incongruent couple. And I think as they mature, they gain understanding, and new relationships evolve, just like when as we grew as people, the relationships that we have with our parents change over time, and so too do the relationships that we have with our children.
And, I also found, like, with the third one, that my kids became very close with each other during the time of our divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And, they call it the siblings conversation,
Mm-hmm.
or they'll say, "Oh, well, that was on the siblings text," because they all text each other, and I think supported each other during that time and shared their anger, shared their frustrations. They shared everything. So because of it, really, their siblings were the only people that really understood what was going on.
It's a good
So
observation. That's when my kids stopped fighting.
yeah,
That's they started getting along.
so we have homework tonight, and it's called Rethinking Divorce. It is on page 21 and 22 of our workbook that is in our group. If you have questions or program about our program, or want to share your story, please book a discovery call. Sometimes it is just nice to tell somebody what is going on, especially somebody that has been there. And a lot of times, my discovery calls are just that, an opportunity for someone to be seen and to be validated, and to often share a story that has been sometimes kept secret from a lot of people. So, Barb, if you can turn off our recording, I will go back to